guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mina and this is Mirkwood Homestead, and I make content about gardening and farming and growing and learning along the way. And today I want to plant all of this basil. I have 10 different varieties of basil here. Last year we planted about 5 different varieties, and we love basil. We use it in everything, and we started making basil tea, which is delicious. It is amazing, and basil is really good for you. Basil is really good for inflammation. It can help digestion. It's got antibacterial properties. So it's just an all-around good herb, and it's super easy to grow. I'm going to be planting a bunch of it just in the same flat, since this is just for me and I'm not going to be selling any plants. I'm going to label it. You know how it goes. You label it and then sometimes you get it mixed up. So we're going to try. Also, if you hear little peeps in the background, that's because I got little peeps in the background. I'm in my spare room where I have my chickens. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys the varieties that I'm going to be planting today. Some I've just bought at the store, some I have ordered, and just ones that I've collected over the years. I've had this lettuce leaf basil for quite a while. I've grown it for a few years. I'm not like a huge fan of the flavor, but it does grow very well. The lettuce leaf basil gets huge, and you can use it actually as wraps, like you would a lettuce wrap. That's why it's called lettuce leaf basil, because it's giant. So then I have, I'll go over the ones that I've planted in the past. I got these actually late summer and decided to try to start and grow some before the end of summer, and it worked. It worked enough to where I was able to add a little bit to some teas and flavor some stuff. Not enough to where I had a ton that I could dry because it was so late in the season. I could have brought it in, but so I got these off of Etsy. We've got the Tulsi basil, which is like the holy basil. It's really good. It's really popular. Sometimes it's kind of hard to find seeds for, but you can usually find them on Etsy. I got lemon basil. It definitely tastes like lemon. Really good. Cinnamon basil was a little bit spicy, just like it says. And blue spice basil, which was my favorite because it actually tastes like vanilla. It's delicious, especially in tea. So the rest of these, I picked this one up today, just a regular sweet basil from the store. I thought I would add it in my collection. I got a spicy saber, unless I'm saying that wrong. That's saber, right? Spicy saber. So look at the jagged leaves. I'm assuming it's probably going to be similar to the cinnamon basil. It's going to have some spice. And again, another spicy basil. This is spicy globe. I'm thinking it's probably going to be just like that one, but this one grows in like a globe. It doesn't grow like a normal basil plant. It actually grows in a really pretty ornamental way, so you could put that in with your flowers and make it look really pretty. This one's called Red Reuben, and it's like a burgundy basil. I've never had a colored basil like that, so we're going to try it. And then this one I got off Baker Creek, and I know I'm gonna say this wrong. Avivi Natoire, or no, I know that I just butchered that, but there's the name. You can look it up, the pronunciation. I got this one because it said that the flavor is floral with a hint of pine and citrus, and it said it was kind of peppery, and that looks like something that I would absolutely want to try. And I just want to like add all these together and make like a basil spice mix, a basil tea, put it on sandwiches, everything that you use basil for. I'm going to be starting these just slightly different than I usually do. I've got a bottom watering tray, and sorry, my cat is scratching at the door. He really wants to get in here with me and these chickens. So I usually do the bottom watering tray with little cups. I'm going to save my cups for my tomatoes and stuff like that. So I've got just like this big 10-20 seed tray that has holes in it, and I've set it in the bottom of another big tray that doesn't have holes in it so they can hold water in the bottom, water it from the bottom. But I didn't want to have to transplant it like immediately. So on the bottom, I put just a little bit of potting soil, and on top, I'm going to put the seed starting mix. And that way, when they get their first true leaves and they need, you know, fertilizer, they get their roots down in the potting soil and they'll be okay. So here I've got my tray, and this is the potting soil, and this is my seed starting mix in my dirty bucket. And I'm just going to put some seed starting mix, layer that on top. I actually made this seed starting mix with just some peat moss and some perlite, because my local store that I was getting seed starting mix from at the time when I bought this didn't have seed starting mix. I had planned on starting seeds like a couple months ago, and I've been so busy I hadn't gotten around to it. Now everywhere has seed starting mix, so, but that's okay. This works well. Peat moss is usually what's in seed starting mix because it is sterile and it's not going to like cause your seeds to mold or anything like that, like sometimes a potting soil could do, or even if the potting soil had too much fertilizer in it for a newly sprouted seed, could burn the seedling. But you could use potting soil to sprout certain seeds in, especially the more hardy of seeds. So I got my layer of seed starting mix on top of my potting soil. Like I said, I've got the potting soil underneath there so I don't have to up pot necessarily super soon. I can leave the basil in here and it can get some nutrients from the bottom. And also, I'll pay attention to make sure that I don't have any signs of malnutrition as the seedlings grow. And if they do, then I'll just add some liquid fertilizer until I'm able to get them into pots or into the ground. I want to do like a basil garden. So I was actually thinking, I've got 2 busted kiddie pools out there that were the geese's, or were the geese, the plural of geese is geese. And since they got holes in them, I was just going to plant some stuff in it, but they're kind of too shallow for anything other than herbs. So I thought about turning those 2 into my basil garden, and then also planting the basil among my tomato plants as I usually do, kind of on the understory of my tomatoes, as it helps with pests and it's just a really good companion plant for tomatoes. With basil, the more that you cut it, like most herbs, the more that you cut it, the bigger it grows. But you can see it in the basil much sooner than you can see it in most other herbs, because basil grows like a monster, especially if you prune it. The more you cut it, the bigger and the bushier it's gonna get. Because with basil, if I have a picture, I'll put it up here. I think I've actually done a video on this before. With basil, you have like your main stem, and then it puts off more growth, and you just trim the top off, and when you top it, it doubles that. So you're essentially just like doubling the size of your plant every time you cut off the top of a stem. Another thing that basil is good for is learning about propagation, specifically water propagation. Along with tomatoes, basil is one of the fastest propagating plants you can use, and it's really good for learning how to water propagate. All you have to do is take a stem of basil, a little cutting off your basil, and you pick the bottom leaves off that's going to be touching the water. You put it in a glass of water and you sit it somewhere sunny. You make sure that it doesn't go dry, and you change the water if it starts looking icky. Some would say change the water daily. You and me both know that sometimes it's hard to remember to do stuff like that. But within like 3 days, you're gonna see roots coming out of that. And you have a whole new plant. You can take one plant and turn it into as many plants as you want. You can also do this with tomatoes. The suckers that come out from above the leaf node, when you cut those off, you can just stick them in water and they'll root in just a few days and you'll have a clone of your tomato plant. My papa likes to tell a story about how his friend learned how to do that. In his adult years, somebody told him to do it and he cut off all his suckers and put it in a jar of water, and then he had so many tomato plants he didn't know what to do with them and he didn't have anywhere to plant them. He had so many tomatoes that year. So if you want to clone your tomatoes and your basil, all you need is water. You definitely want to wet your seed starting mix. And whenever you're starting any kind of seeds, you want to wet the mix first before you put the seeds in it, because it's so dry. What's going to happen is if you plant your seeds in that dry seed starting mix and then you pour water on top of it, like, it's all going to float to the top. It's all going to float to the top and your seeds are going to go every which way. They might even overflow and come out of the container. Everything's going to get mixed up and it's just a big mess. So always pre-moisten your seed starting mix. Now, I'm doing this, on a budget, and also I just haven't ordered any labels. I usually use painter's tape to label my plant containers, and that is perfectly fine. Use what you got. I've planted in cardboard, I've planted in aluminum cans, I have planted in every container you can think of, and as long as you got dirt and seeds, it'll grow. What I'm gonna do is just kind of section it off in my head and put 5 different types on each side, and then label underneath what they are and kind of put them in little squares. And basil is really easily transplanted, just like a tomato. It's a pretty hardy plant, so I'm not going to be too worried about pulling those plants apart and getting them into a bigger space when the time comes. And the only bad thing about using stuff like tape, or if you've got popsicle sticks laying around, is, especially with popsicle sticks, your words are going to start to run when they get wet. It's not something that's going to last a very long time. So I'm eventually going to have to get those little plastic tags, especially if I want to keep my plants straight. But for now, this is gonna do. And if I was planting these to sell, which I might plant a few in the future to sell some starts of, I will definitely be using a different tag or their own pot, so that I know for sure what I've planted and I'm not selling something to somebody that might be a different variety. So now I've got my tape on here and it's going to give me an idea of what I've planted. Then I'm just going to sprinkle the seeds on top. I'm not going to be too diligent about trying to space them out because they are easily transplanted. They don't mind having their roots tug just a little bit. After that, I'm just going to sprinkle just a little bit of dirt on top. They need to be about 1/4 of an inch deep. If you can see here, the seeds are super tiny, so you don't want to plant them too deep or else they're going to have a hard time finding the surface. And what's interesting is some of the seed varieties are slightly bigger than others. So this is the cinnamon basil. That first one was the blue spice. So the blue spice basil seeds were definitely smaller than the cinnamon basil. And it's really easy to save basil seed. If you let basil go to seed, just like any other plant, it'll kind of stop growing. Like, the more you prune it, the bigger it's gonna get, like I said earlier. But if you let it flower and go to seed, they're really easy to save seeds from, and then you don't have to buy seed the next year. So the Tulsi basil seeds are like the smallest of them all. If it'll even focus. They are tiny, tiny so far of the ones that I've planted. Well, I was talking bad about the lettuce leaf basil, and now I don't think I'm going to be able to have any at all this year because it looks as though my seed packet somehow got wet. So this is where I aim to tell you to do as I say and not as I do, and please store your seed packets in a closed off container in Ziploc baggies somewhere where it's not like humid. Like, don't store it in a greenhouse or outside in a car or anywhere where it's going to be, the temperature is going to be fluctuating. I'll tell you a funny story. I ordered a bunch of fall seeds a couple years back and then just had like the worst year of my life. And those seeds sat on my counter for about a month, and so did a cluster of bananas right above them, and I didn't realize that the bananas had rotted and that the seeds were directly underneath of them, and they got wet. They either molded or they tried to sprout and then died, and I didn't get to have any of those seeds. Actually, I've tried to plant several of those seeds and so far none of them have come up. I still have a few packets left that I thought about doing an experiment video on to see if any of them would come up. But yeah, don't do like I did and forget about your seed packets. Put them away as soon as they get home, because if you're anything like me, sometimes life just gets ahead of you and you forget and something silly happens, like a rotten banana. But anyway, yeah, some of these seeds look like they might have gotten wet and maybe molded or tried to sprout, but I'm going to put them in there anyway because, I mean, what's it gonna hurt? If it's dead, it's dead, but if there's one or two that aren't, then I'll get a basil plant. So we're gonna see, and I'll update you guys on that adventure. Okay, I very lightly covered up my seeds. I'm going to give them a little spritz of water and then put water in the bottom of my bottom watering tray, and that way that'll keep the soil moist and give everything a jump start, and that way whenever they come up they'll be good and watered, and all I have to do is every few days check the water level in my tray. And as soon as I see a little green sprout, I'm going to make sure that they are under a plant light. I've also got them put in front of a window, so they're gonna stay inside until all the threat of frost is gone, because basil is frost tender. So we don't want to put it out there until all threat of frost is gone, and the weather has just been nuts in the last couple of years. So it's usually around May 10th here where I'm at in Southwest Virginia. But that's going to be different wherever you are. So just put in your zone or the town that you live in, and then ask Google when your last frost date is. And then once you start coming up on your last frost date, check the weather, because it could be a few days before or a few days after where it might threaten to freeze, and it's just different every year, but usually around here it's around May 10th. Thank you guys for watching. I might start doing maybe a seedling Saturday where I plant something every Saturday until gardening season is over and done with. That might give me some motivation. Or, you know, for Seedling Saturday, maybe I can just make a video of me in the garden even if I'm not starting new seeds. But I have a ton of seeds to start, and I cannot wait to show you, especially my tomato and pepper seeds. That is going to be a really fun video, and I cannot wait to share that with you. So if you like this video, thank you for making it all the way to the end. Hit the subscribe button, it helps me a lot. Like, comment, and share with your friends, and I'll see you next time. Bye!